Well, howdy, y'all. This is Market Explainer, the business news podcast. We're the largest in the universe. We're the fastest growing. Still definitely better than Group Chat Pod.
Wait a minute. The largest? Is that a fat joke? Are we starting it out with a fat joke?
I don't know if it's a fat joke. I think it's it's a factual statement about our size.
Since the rebranding, you say howdy at the beginning of every...
Correct.
Howdy. Like, hey, whatever, embrace it.
We got a cowboy hat in our logo, so... Okay.
There you go.
Like I was trying to say before I was rudely interrupted by my junior assistant, the traveling co-host, the big man, that we are still better than Group Chat Podcast, and I currently am working on, signed the contract, Anand, we're working on a boxing match.
It better last like 90 seconds, right?
I'm fighting all three of them at the same time, man.
All three of them at the same time.
I usually do Taekwondo. Nice. Before we get rolling, I want to tell you about our Patreon. Our Patreon's actually up and running. Mm-hmm. At our most exclusive tier, you got to call us dirty names. At our most popular tier, you got to join our board of directors.
Board of directors where you get to call Danny names. We should be able to record that live. Like, I don't know. That should be definitely a live. We'll set a time for just 60 straight minutes. Maybe we won't. Yeah. Maybe we'll start out with 5 just to give you some.
We'll do it on Clubhouse.
Be like a dunking booth. You know what I mean? Like, just.
Hey, listen. I've always said, we're all just Mary Magdalene. You pay me enough money. A lot of stuff you can get. So,
all right. Yeah. So what are we talking about today, Dan?
This first today, hometown story. Hometown.
It is a hometown story.
Everyone is discussing tip of their tongues cloud infrastructure, the growth of cloud computing. And Michael Dell, Austin's very own. His brother is an eye surgeon who almost gave me eye surgery.
Really?
Yeah, he's in South Austin. I didn't go there. I ended up going somewhere else.
I still didn't know that his brother was an eye surgeon. I knew he had family and brothers and sisters, but
they're a hometown crew. So a few years ago, I think it's 2013 or 14, Michael Dell loaded up as much leverage as he could get his hands on.
Well, hold on. Back up a little bit. Before we get into that part. We chose to do this because of an article that came out in Fortune, right?
Forbes,
about Michael Dell. And the reason I say back up a little bit is because in this article, one of my favorite things about the article is, like most interviews, they sit down and they talk about not that first. They talk about the person. And like the very first thing, obviously with where we are in the world in August and that Branson and Jeff Bezos just shot themselves into orbit and whatever, they kind of asked Michael Dell about it because Michael Dell, people don't realize, is part of that club without being as out in the world, right, as everybody else. No pun intended. But his first thing is he takes a shot at Jeff Bezos like, no, I'm perfectly happy staying on Earth versus other
slightly above Earth, like for $3 billion or whatever it costs.
Yeah, just out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like
so. Basically, the subject for this first segment is we're really just talking about how Michael Dell turned not only his personal fortune in 10x in a matter of a few years, right? It's easy to go from 4 to
not
40.
once but twice. I mean, he did this. If you don't know Michael Dell's story, and if you don't mind me really quickly telling it before we get into what this is, actually his second time of what we talk about on this show all the time about innovation, pivoting, understanding timing, and that kind of stuff. Michael Dell went to University of Texas in Austin, right? Correct. Smart kid, not an Elon Musk, not a Bill Gates, so not a geek, not a nerd, not a IQ out of, you know what I mean, this planet. He was really good, though, for whatever reason. This is one of those kids like a, who's the guy that wrote
Hustler.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
Robert Kiyosaki.
Like, just at a very young age was able to identify, here's something that I can do to make money, right?
Right. So when I didn't know all this stuff about Michael Dell until I read the article, and after reading the article, my first instinct was to say, "Oh, this guy's more of a hustler than he is
100%.
Like a computer guy, right?"
Computers were just a byproduct of what he figured out, right? And if you go and you read the story, it tells the story about, essentially him selling computer components at University of Texas here in Austin. And once that made something like, I don't know, a couple $1 million in one, quarter or something like that.
I think in 1 month he made 80 grand, and that's when he dropped out. And
he was like, why am I going to go get a whatever degree here at University of Texas if I can just make 80 grand a month, right, selling computer parts? And then he, lit off on his dream to sell, put computers together for the world. But, I mean, this guy, when you say hustle, this guy was taking over the phone orders, fill out this form and mail it to me orders, building the computers himself, and then mailing them the computers to them. Like, this is what the guy was doing. And then all of a sudden he went from $80,000 a month to a couple of $1 million a year, right. And so on and so forth.
He pioneered that entire business model, right?
Well, absolutely.
Which so many companies have, and God bless them, so many companies came after him and said, we can do that, right? Because he understood, I think, like, I don't know what his psychology was back then or strategy was back then, but it probably was, I'm not going to go buy a bunch of components if I don't know what the market wants. I'll just ask them what they want. Novel concept.
This is a lot of people, and again, living in Austin the way I do, and I actually temped at Dell 20 years ago, part-time, because they paid a crap load of money for salespeople. If you hit your bonuses, you could make a junk ton of money. And I did consistently, because I knew about, technology and blah, blah, blah. Point is...
Back then.
The point is he gets a lot of crap because of this business model. Look, his business model is the opposite of a lot of business models. He is a very shrewd businessman. This guy knows his money. It causes him to be portrayed on and off throughout the years as a kind of a heartless businessman, right? A shrewd businessman.
Which I love, which I appreciate.
His business model, like you said, of non-inventory to build these computers and stuff like that, he pushed this off on his suppliers, and he's put suppliers out of business on how much he leverages against his suppliers to get a better deal, to improve profit margins. When I worked there, one of the craziest things you could see, and this is how shrewd he is, he actually has, and I'm sure they still use this type of software today, when you call Dell, whether it's on the business side or the personal side, that person talking to you, every component that goes in a computer has a price that salesperson can see plus or minus.
Right, yeah.
Right? So, not only on your side, but their bonus side. Does that make sense?
Right,
so, not only is this making Dell a profit of $20, but what that profit then turns into your bonus, what you get credit for. So, when you're building a computer and you know a lot about computers, and you're talking to somebody and you say, hey, you really need to upgrade your RAM because you're telling me you're going to be editing photos or whatever, they... going from 512 to this, and you see what I'm saying? You're able to like push people in certain directions where... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, Dell could have easily been BlackBerry, Palm, Compaq.
Absolutely. I mean,
they could have easily fell by the wayside and not mattered going forward. But Michael...
That's what everybody thought was going to happen, by the way. In the late 2000s, a lot of people thought Dell, and that's where we come to this article and what they're referring to, is in the late 2000s, everybody thought Dell was going to die. Because computers were coming way down in price because HP, Gateway, all these other people had pushed into the marketplace.
And pushed the prices so low.
And technology as a whole was coming down, though. Building the computer components and all that stuff.
Right, and then... there was a huge shift to what happened where the mobile market, where people started using iPhones, which for a lot of people was their gateway to starting to use Apple products. And people started craving premium technology because the kind of appliance aspect of technology, because, tech was just a side thing for the majority of people's lives until very recently in human history was tech. This is how we exist, right? We exist in our machines.
Well, the first iPhone didn't come out till, 2007?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
so you figure, like you just said, and then you liken that to it. Computers like Dell, HP, Gateway, these big manufacturers of computers were selling technology that was years old, right? Because they weren't giving you weren't calling up Dell and buying the processor that was just created 6 months ago. Like that was, of course not. It was inexpensive. It was years old technology. Right. But then iPhones came out, and more of the phones came out, and the computer systems are what chipset has come out in the last year.
And I think what happened is, for a lot of people, Apple just felt like they were from the future. Now, if you walk into an Apple store and, like, they're a commodity now, if you like, I use Windows and Android, Apple feels ancient. It feels old because it's all just, it's warmed over. But reality,
that's the only way Mac survived. Honestly, this is, go back and look at iPhone, Mac, Apple history. Mac only survived in higher education.
Right.
If you went to school, higher education for engineering or CAD design, whatever, you were required to buy a Mac, because Dell, your normal Windows programming didn't run what they needed it to do.
Yeah, and now that's not true, because I know a lot of people in all sorts of graphical whether it's CAD. I do graphic design work. I have a handful of different softwares. I started on a Mac when I got into graphic design. That was one of the few people in 2010. I was like, I'm not using this garbage anymore. I want faster processors. I want customization. So I went back to C. But what the story is about is how this guy turned this thing around. And he foresaw the rise in cloud computing and how AI and how, driverless cars, how that technology was so much. People love to talk about cloud. They say Google, Microsoft, and Amazon. But Dell currently is the Dell EMC and VMware, which is owned by Dell, which is, I think, going to be spun off into a public company sooner or later.
It is.
Which Dell Technologies is no longer Dell Computers, is Dell Technologies. They have the market share. They're not a joke.
Well, and data storage, right?
Yeah.
So he's leading it in both. He recognized several years ago, about 9 years ago, everybody thought he was crazy, right? Michael Dell went public, took Dell public in the mid-2000s, right?
Yeah.
The company started, he lost controlling interest in the company when he went public.
Of course, yeah.
I think based on that controlling interest, at least here in Austin at the time, the idea was Michael Dell built a company, and he did what everybody that does build a company do. They sold out the majority stake, and then they're just writing it out, right? I'm a rich person writing it out. Yeah. The story went, at least here in Austin, is that when the company started tanking, he didn't like the fact that his name was on the box.
Right.
And it started failing, and he couldn't deal with that failure.
Right.
So he went around. He turned around and said, "Whoa, wait a minute. Here's another opportunity.
Right.
I need to buy back my company. I need to make it private so that I can make the decisions that I need to make
to turn this thing around.
And that's exactly what he did.
And he went to Silver Lake Partners, and he initially met with a partner from Silver Lake. They were just talking about something random, and then the guy's like, listen, I think you should take Dell private again. And he's like, yeah, I'm on board. And it was as simple as that. They had a conversation about taking Dell private, and they did it.
If you look at this timeline, it's much like, again, Robert Kiyosaki and a lot of these other billionaires. If you look at this timeline, you'll find out that one thing I like about certain books, especially self-help books and business or whatever, you learn that a lot of these really, really rich people, a lot of these really big money-making people gained that money, that opportunity through conversations, right? Yeah. So this guy, Michael Dell...
You know a guy somewhere, and
there was a whole bunch of people during the process of these meetings that could have told Michael Dell no because they didn't know who he was or didn't know who he was working with or whatever. He goes in and just pitches this, hey, I want to take this public company private, And then I want to leverage myself to the hilt buying another company because I think it's going to be the future. Most people would go, you're stupid. You're insane. Computers are a dying market, right?
Right.
And because it's Michael Dell and he's got his southern accent and he's a nice guy and blah, 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 blah.
Just charmed him into it.
It's just a bunch of conversations.
J.P. Morgan put up a lot of the money. So Jamie Dimon, right? Jamie Dimon is nobody's slouch, right? So what I love about this particular story is that they bought EMC, which is now Dell EMC, which owned a huge stake of VMware, which again, they're spinning that off. So when it comes to cloud computing and all of the infrastructure that goes along with it, they're vertically integrated.
Right.
The whole thing is in-house. So, and I am a guy who, I use a PC. I don't have a Dell right now. But the next laptop I buy will probably be a Dell because that's the only company I can go to because they actually sell CAD-grade computers, laptops, workstations that you can stick huge processors and RAM into. They're the only people that do it. So he took... he kind of really just not only did he turn the company around, he pivoted their entire business model. Right, they went from being Dell Computers to Dell Technologies. We've talked about on this show before how the good people over at Amazon, all of their money is made from AWS. Right,
right. Their profits,
$4 billion 100%. In profit a year. It's from AWS. So similarly, Dell understood that this was the scalable moment for that technology, or for that, that was the place to be. He foresaw that in a way that I don't think he gets credit for.
No, well, because everybody's talking about Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and all these changes or whatever. Here's a guy that literally sat down in this interview and said it didn't feel like a risk to him. This guy leveraged everything he had to buy back his company, including going and getting billions. $70 billion, by the way, is what. And then turns around 2 years later, and goes and gets to another $67 billion to buy EMC because here's what he knew, I believe he really thought this, and to me, this is what I got out of the interview.
Right.
He didn't think it was risky. In his mind, there are different kind of debts in the world, right? And a lot of people it will tell you flat out it's not good business to leverage yourself to the hilt. And I'm not a huge leverage guy. But to him, it was borrowing money against what he knew was going to be future profits, right? So him wanting to take... If he thought that artificial intelligence, data storage, right, and cloud computing were the future... He knew he already had all the relationships, because when people think of Dell, and because most people are just average consumers, they think of Dell home computers. What people don't realize is the man has contracts with every company out there, from the United States government to school districts to every business you can think of out there has Dell contracts where they buy computers for their employees, whatever. So
then on the back end,
he had all the contacts. So if he thought cloud computing and AI and data storage was the future, all he had to do was acquire that technology and then leverage his current relationships. You already buy computers from me. You might as well buy storage, the future technology, all that stuff from me.
Here's a quote. Let me just say this. The results have been remarkable. Automobiles, telecommunication, energy grids, hospitals and logistics networks all have become digital businesses producing ever-increasing reams of data that needs to be managed in stores. Michael Dell now sits at the helm of the world's largest infrastructure provider for this activity. The amount of data being created in the world is astounding. It's doubling every 7 or 8 months. What that means is, as everything becomes digital, that's the world we continue to live in. The volume of existing data that goes digital combined with the volume of data being created, it's doubling. The volume of data at whole is doubling every 7 months.
And that's only going to accelerate, you think, with driverless cars, with everything going. And here's the other. He also he saw this a decade ago. I remember reading an article about this a decade ago about how, because they were already doing low-level data storage, right, servers, Dell developing and building their own servers, right, was a late 2000s thing. Right? They started developing servers, and they started building this. And his idea, though, was everybody was going to these big server farms, right? What is it, Rockspace and all these? Backspace. Everybody went to these server farms, right, so that they could store all this data. Well, his idea, which has proved to be perfection yet again, was not big server farms, but small, local distribution server farms, because speed, microseconds, is going to be, when you're talking about driverless cars, when you're talking about cloud computing, the closeness, microseconds, we're going to measure speeds and stuff like that. The ability for your car to decide that that's a stop sign or a pedestrian or whatever is going to be decided in microseconds. So he already started a decade with putting these servers and this data storage in local areas, instead of just, okay, I've got 2 plants in North America, right, and I just keep adding to them and adding to them.
There was somebody on this show, I genius, good-looking guy, single too. He said something along the lines of, screw getting a single-family home for a real estate investment, get me a server farm. I think that was me.
But here's the other thing that I find interesting about this story, and again, it goes back to his ability to tell stories. And this is, look, if you listen to this podcast for a while, you know that I grew up dirt poor, right? Like, I grew up not always, whether I look like it or not, knowing where my next meal is coming from, or going to the chicken bin and killing the chicken that we were having for dinner. Like, I've done that in my lifetime, right?
Right.
So, and then growing through, what I realized is when I was young and poor, I did not, and I had no knowledge of this at the time, but I did not have access to money either. I was poor. I didn't, even if I knew what to do with money, and I didn't at that point, I didn't know. I didn't have access to it. Even if I knew what to do with it, I didn't have access to it. However, when you have money, man, it just flows. And not only does it flow, but it flows super duper cheap. So when this guy, even though these numbers are large, you have to look at things
astronomical.
But you have to look at it from a perspective of, he's a billionaire anyway, right? So to him, this is like you and me going down and getting $1,000 loan and them telling you, I'm going to charge you $1. I'm going to charge you a 0.1% interest rate. He had access to super, super cheap money. And not only super cheap money, but money that didn't want anything out of him but profit. He actually, through this process, when he's a publicly traded company, before he went private again, I think he was down to, 20% ownership or something
15.
like that. You know, you're getting super cheap money. So he started out with, when it was public, what did you say, 15%? I thought it was like 21, 16% is all he owned. And now he's up to 50-something percent?
52. He's the majority stakeholder now.
So he's the majority stakeholder at 52%. So he borrowed money that he's paying back.
Yeah, and usually in these kind of leveraged buyout or these situations where big money comes in, they're not coming in as a pure silent investor. They're coming in as taking over the board. We're going to, a lot of these situations where like Carl Icahn was against this move. Carl Icahn is a ding-dong, it turns out. He so much money to be made here. They usually have a lot more say in the direction of the company. The fact that billions of dollars in leverage flowed to Michael Dell, and all they said was, what you think is best?
I would love to see the back end of this. Like, let's say 2 or 3 years from now, by 2025, 4 years from now, all of the money's paid back. Right, Michael Dell still owns 50% of Dell as it looks at that point, right, in these 2 different companies, yada, yada. The back end are never published until they're back ended, right, until you go public again, which I'm sure he will at some point. And then you look at those numbers to go, how much interest did he pay on this Grand total, $130 billion, right? I guarantee you it's next to nothing.
Well, because next to nothing, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
Next to nothing, hundreds of millions of dollars.
But in the grand scheme of loan to, or whatever.
I'm just saying, they put out how many, let's just say it's $130 billion they put on the street with Michael Dell. They might come back with $4 or $5 million in profits, right?
Even if it's $100 million.
Yeah.
You see, it's a fraction of what your average everyday person pays on a car note or a home loan or whatever.
Right. So the adage, the old adage that the kind of socialist lefties like to say is the rich get richer, right, and the poor get poor. Well, there's a reason why the poor get poor. It's not really something we'll talk about on the show, but one of the reasons the rich get richer is they can do this.
Absolutely.
Go ahead and get Jamie Dimon on the phone and let her know $130 billion to LBO, Dell, and you're going to turn it around, and then you're going to buy EMC, and you're going to spin off VMware. Let them know. Just give them a call. See how far you get.
Right. Well, I mean, look, the rich have leverage, right? They have a house that you could sell. I mean, the risk goes down. But look,
they got something you can take.
The point is this guy not only has done it once, but he's done it twice in two different decades, 2 different centuries, actually, in the 90s and then again in 2000, teens. Yeah. So he's done it not once as a fluke, but he's done it now twice. And in my opinion, in the next 5 years, he's already leveraged himself to do it a third time when it comes to, at the end of the article, they're talking about virtual desktops, right? Post-pandemic footprints is what he's talking about, 5G infrastructure and stuff like that. So he's positioned himself to be the person to go to for the next 20 years.
It's brilliant that he's done that, right? And I think there's that saying, if you talk to wealthier people or like those coaches, it's like, well, you could take all my money away and I'll have, I think Warren Buffett has said this. You could take all my money away and I'll get it back. It's true, though, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not that somebody handed you. There's a misconception by people who don't care for capitalism that anybody can achieve these results when well capitalized. If your daddy gives you a small loan of $1 million, you can go out there and you can do this. The reality is, don't think so.
You still need knowledge. You need experience. You need to know what you're doing.
Not just knowledge. Not simply knowledge. You have to have foresight, and you have to have this other thing called big, giant brass balls. If you don't have because the point is, you take somebody who doesn't understand economics or the future, doesn't have a broader understanding about a lot of things where the world could go. Their opinion, well, I'll just take this $1 billion and I'll conservatively put it into the bank or the stock market. They wouldn't think, don't go get $1 billion. Go get 13 times that. Sorry, 130 times that. And buy this and then do that. That's not a process that they're thinking about because they lack understanding. So it's not simply just knowledge that you're going to go read in a book. It's innovation.
We have a Market Explainer podcast. Can we create an annual Brass Balls Award? Right?
Yes.
Like, can I send Michael Dell the Brass Balls Award? Yes. Anybody that can just go, hey, you don't understand this right now, right? Like he had to stand in a room with a whole bunch of investors, right? Even though he was Michael Dell,
right?
Asked for $60 billion,
right,
for something that I guarantee you, no one in the room knew what he was talking about.
They didn't have a clue.
Right? And ask them for $60 billion and then get it.
Right.
Right? And so that is, like you said, but again, he understood it, but the question always becomes, does he? Right? If you're that investor, right? Does he actually know what he's doing? But so that as you quite eloquently put it, brass balls.
Right. Big old brass cojones, my friend. Listen, we would call that, like Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank. And we're going to talk about Shark Tank a little bit in the episode. He say, I want my money to come back with friends. And that's what, he You sent out your kids, and they came back with friends, man. So I think he did well for his investors. I think this guy really. I mean, listen again. He pivoted the company from being a not just public company to private, but he pivoted the business from being a commercial seller of hardware, and to being kind of the go-to consumer hardware laptop, to being they sell laptops, right? Because they're already buying so much component wear and all this other stuff for their infrastructure. They have the vertical integration to do it. It makes sense. Like, it's a side business, though.
And although Oberwell doesn't stop, he'll never stop doing that.
Yeah.
He has mastered the Ford machinery, right? Yes. The Ford assembly line of making computers better, stronger, faster, cheaper.
The business that made Michael Dell a household name, that put him in a room with Jamie Dimon and all these other billionaires and people giving him money and Silver Lake Partners and all this other stuff. That name, that business, is an afterthought to his existing portfolio of virtual machines and data storage.
That's insane to think about, though. And he'll continue to do that.
Right.
Because
Compaq is dead, Gateway gone, eMachine, all of these companies. I can start listing all the companies that you, at some point in time, in IBM ThinkPad, which is now Lenovo, which is a Chinese company, I can list off of the laptops that Sony got out of the business, right? We can sit here and list off for days companies that got into PC component hardware business, got out and couldn't survive. Michael Dell didn't just survive, took that business and made it an afterthought to a multi-billion-dollar portfolio, and in his just retired, probably sitting at a massive compound somewhere in Lakeway, smoking a cigar, and goes, I guess I'll just go from $4 billion in personal net worth to $40 billion.
Yes.
In a matter of no time. And listen, $4 billion is nothing to see. It's still private jets, massive yachts.
Yes.
It is $4 billion is
enough for you to sit around and do nothing forever. Like nothing
for your kids to develop a pixie dust habit that no one, it won't even make a ding, okay?
I didn't realize it until and I read this as part of the article, but it never occurred to me, and maybe it's because Michael Dell, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, we've talked about these guys on here a bunch of times on this podcast because they're constantly in the news. Yeah. Michael Dell very rarely is in the news or whatever, but if you think about it, he's the last man standing of the original technology guard. Right? He came up at the same time as Bill Gates. He came up at the same time as whatever the Apple guy's name is, right?
Steve Jobs.
He came up at the same time as them.
Right.
He's the only one still working, though.
Right.
All of them have gone on to their philanthropic or their, whatever jobs or whatever. He's the only one still going, though.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's younger than a lot of those guys. He's 56, right?
But again, it doesn't matter, though. He's still working. Not only is he still working, he's still working on his original project.
Right, his original company that bears his name. There's a funny video somewhere. There's a spoof video. I don't know if College Humor or somebody. They made a spoof trailer about the Michael Dell movie. Because,
does College Humor still exist?
No,
College Humor is a great website for funny stuff before Reddit, before TikTok, before whatever.
They're basically out of business, but they made if I can find it, I'll put it in the description, or it could be Funny or Die, too. What I think is hilarious, it's just like, how they made that movie they made 4 movies about Believe Yobs, or whatever the Apple guy is. And they made, and this was just like, all right, now move the E sideways. That's the logo. It was really funny. But, exactly. Let's just close with this. You're a big man. You're, 50, whatever. You're 49 years old. You got $4 billion off of big man computers.
Uh-huh.
Are you bothering to do anything with are you picking up your phone and going, I'll buy the company out of the public, and then we'll leverage ourselves to the hills, or are you just, I'm on vacation? Are you and Mrs. the Big Man just
me like Michael Dell? I will work forever, right? So And I agree with him. That's part of the article here is they ask him, like, look, are you going to check out at some point and just go do the Bill Gates thing, go do the whatever. And look, him and his wife here in Austin, they own Dell Children. They built Dell Children's Hospital here in Austin. Yeah. They are big philanthropic. Not only from a kid standpoint, their think tank for bringing technology to Texas is one of the biggest in the United States. It's one of the reasons that technology has been coming here for 20 years is because they invest directly in a think tank of some sort to help technologies here in Austin, Texas, and stuff like that. So they do these things, but Michael Dell, it seems like, at least according to this article, they asked him point blank, I mean, look, are you going to do this, go public again, and then go right off into the sunset? And he's like, look, I just don't think that's me. He's like, I think I'd be bored, I'd get lonely. He's like, I'd be depressed, right?
His exact words were something along the lines of, well, my twins are off to college, so there's really nothing to do at the house anymore.
Well, and so to me, the same thing, right?
Let me tell you what I mean? So not 4 billion, not 1 billion, 100 million. I can figure out how to use up the time.
All I'm saying is you're going to continue to do this podcast contractually, regardless of your net worth. You keep adding things to the contract. I'm going to add that to the contract. Regardless of either our net worths, you'll continue to do this podcast for
we'll see about
2 hours a week. So,
before we keep going, we have another story, and it's sponsored by our friends over at Acre Gold. Meet the new store of value. It's the same as the old store of value. Timeless, thoughtfully designed, and guaranteed to retain value in a way your cash never will. 2.5 grams of Acre Gold bars is the perfect amount of gold for the first-time gold buyer or the seasoned investor. Click the link down in the description. You can get your subscription started. They have low-cost subscriptions. Pay a little bit of money up front. Then when you accumulate enough, they actually just send you 2.5 grams.
Very nice. I love it. All right, what do we got next?
So, Ghost Kitchens, which was a story that we did at the beginning of...
a while back.
They're growing. I'm seeing
Imagine
them
that
pop
we
up.
Called it. That's what I'm saying. We called it.
Our good friends over at Kroger, which in Central Texans, we don't really have Kroger here, right?
No, North Texas has them.
Yeah,
Dallas DFW area, right? But no, Central Texas.
We're Texas. We're Central Texas is so Texas is the most American state in the union, and I refer to it as a country because it is. And also, the Central Texas area is the most, middle finger, we're special part of,
It really is.
Yeah, I mean, Beaumont has its own thing going on, but that's Beaumont. But Central Texas is no, we're the better Texas, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's why we don't have a Kroger here. We only have HEB. But, so Kroger...
Go and check out, if you're a fan of this show, you'd definitely be a fan of Your Mom's House podcast. If you haven't ever checked that out, go check that out. It's a comedy podcast.
Just moved to Austin.
They moved to Austin not too long ago. And on one of their most recent episodes, I mean, she fell down the stairs or something like that or whatever. But she tells a story about the first time she went to HEB here in Austin, and she's like, oh my God, this is what a grocery store is supposed to be. She all about it or whatever. People love their HEB. And the part about this Ghost Kitchen and Kroger, HEB would be the store in Central Texas if this... And HEB already has, they make fresh sushi, you know what I mean? And they have a restaurant inside anyway. But if they were to partner, this would be a brilliant thing. They would be the one here in Central Texas, if it was going to happen, that it would happen with.
Right, and here's the interesting part. Kitchen United is the company that owns Ghost Kitchen. Mm-hmm. And Kroger has partnered with them to build Ghost Kitchens into Kroger's. Now, we talked about Ghost Kitchens before. We talked about Kroger because Kroger has partnered with a company overseas, I think British, called Ocado, which is avocado without the A. And they have built a completely delivery-only grocery infrastructure. What I love about Kroger is they are an ancient grocery selling dry goods is a ancient business.
Yes.
This is old as time. It's not the world's oldest business because that's Mary Magdalenism, but it's not. It's old.
And Kroger is an ancient name in the market business.
It is a heritage brand, if you'd want to call it that, right? It is when people are they're like, I'm going to Publix. I've never heard of Publix, but I'm not going to any store with an X in the name. That's gross. There's a rule. So what they're doing here, and what I love about Kroger, again, not as someone who's ever going to walk into a Kroger at any time soon in his life, right? I love the fact that they're trying to innovate. I love the fact that they're looking at the future and going, some millennial that's wearing a ski cap in July in Florida is going to write an app and it's going to kill our business. And we need to be ahead of the curve here. So they partner with Ocado and they go, hey, wait, you guys are just going to take a bunch of produce, season it lightly, and sell it for a 50% markup? Just do it in our backyard here. Like, we have best space.
Well, and look, and I'll say this really quickly because obviously if you haven't seen the Ghost Kitchen episode we did for a while back, it's essentially where a company comes in, sets up a kitchen, a generic back restaurant, right? A kitchen, and then there are a couple of different ways to do it, but basically license food from local restaurants, right? Your name, fill in blank Mexican food restaurant, fill in blank generic Italian restaurant, whatever. They make it all in the same kitchen.
Right.
And then it goes out typically in delivery. And this obviously got popular in the last 18 months when people couldn't go in and eat inside and stuff like that. It gained in popularity.
That's where celebrities like YouTuber Mr. Beast came out with Mr. Beast burgers. And Guy Fieri had
Gordon Ramsay. A bunch of these big chefs have done these.
Yeah. And as a side note about Ghost Kitchen, a bunch of companies that are like they just have the infrastructure, but nobody would ever order takeout from them, have created just a white label brand where they just take their existing product, just label it something different. And one of them for Chili's is just wings. Chili's will sell you because I saw this on one of the apps. Just wings. I've never heard of that place. I want to try it, and I look up the address on Google Maps, and it's a freaking Chili's, man.
Yep.
I was like, and what's really funny is, Chuck E. Cheese did this with pizza.
Right. Okay.
Chuck E. Cheese just came up with their own pizza. It's hilarious. So,
But it's a brilliant idea. I guarantee you, Kroger, when they open this kitchen, I guarantee you that part of the negotiation and part of the thing, everything that goes into the kitchen is from the grocery store. They're purchasing from the grocery store itself. So Kroger gets to literally create, if I've got a Kroger in right here down the street in Cedar Park, Kroger created a whole nother line of revenue for that restaurant. For that Kroger, right?
So the Wahlberg brothers own a burger franchise called Wahlburgers. And in the Midwest, we had a...
that is awful. That's an awful name, but go ahead.
The burgers are...
It doesn't matter if people buy them.
I know. So they have one in the Mall of America, which is my hometown. Same city is where I was born and raised. I went there last time when's the last time I walked into a mall? But 2018 or something maybe. Not great. They partnered with a grocery store called Hy-Vee, which is based out of Iowa. It's all over the Midwest, and that was a very successful model for them.
That's an awful name for a restaurant. That is like a slang term from the '80s for not a great thing. But anyway, go ahead.
Hy-Vee or Wahlburgers?
No, Hy-Vee. I'm just saying. Horrible name for a grocery store, but go ahead.
Yeah, it is. But so the future of grocery retail seems to be innovative, right? It's prepared foods, not like when I used to walk into when I was in college or high school, my buddies and I would walk into the grocery store. Yeah, there's the deli potato salad, but
you go where you die, right? The deli counter was their only real, right? And that's where you always found this supermarket food, fried burritos, potato salad, whatever, was over at their deli counter, right? You know what I mean? And it was probably high marked up food, right, that they can make a profit off of and keep warm all day. But this is a way, like you just said, you either growing or you're dying. So a company like Kroger, which, look, supermarkets have had it rough for a while. Right? I mean, with it's more competition, they can't really go up on prices a whole lot every other week like a lot of other places can do, because people still want to spend 39 cents a pound on bananas. If you go to 49 cents, they throw a crazy, you know what I mean, fit. So they've had a hard run at it.
When it comes to restaurant infrastructure, there's tons of regulation. You have a commercial kitchen, there's tons of regulation. And if you are a Kroger, you're a whatever, you already have the infrastructure there, right?
Yep. I'm sure they're very similar guidelines, right?
And you
of how things are handled.
Exactly. And you have vertical integration, because you're already going to the suppliers that sell food. And maybe you're correct, maybe you're not. I'm just spitballing here. But usually food that's sold as a grocery versus food that's sold prepared, different suppliers, right? But I'm sure they already have those suppliers, right?
I'm sure.
Yeah, because they white label a bunch of stuff with Kroger's brand, whatever that is. I don't know what it is. Right. So I'm just saying that they have the vertical integration, they have the distribution, they already have the regulatory part completed, because they have prepared foods, which means they have to have an infrastructure monitor the quality of that. Why wouldn't they do this? Right?
When you put it in that light, sometimes in business you look at something and go, why didn't this happen a long time ago? Like, this seems like to me, on this side of this happening, why wasn't there a grocery store attached to every, or why wasn't there a restaurant attached to every grocery store in America? Like, I don't, like, why? And even in strip centers where you say, okay, there's a Mexican food restaurant in the same strip center as Kroger, they're ordering their food from someone else. Why aren't they ordering it from Kroger?
Right.
What? Like,
well, and because you know where I used to live, Minnesota, there's one. That's it. It's called Super Value, and they're basically the distributor for most all of grocery in the Midwest, and they also do a lot of restaurants. So it's like, well,
yeah, it would not surprise me if this is a trend that catches on, and you see more and more, not just Kroger's, but in general, more grocery stores taking on these kind of relationships, right, or developing their own, instead of developing a relationship with a ghost kitchen, just creating it themselves. An HEB brand would be something that would do something like that. Like, we're going to remodel our stores and put in a restaurant.
No, if you go to the HEB in Mueller, which is kind of the north of downtown Austin, it's hipstery. It's gross, but it's hipstery. That HEB is always popping. They got live music outside, which gives me a migraine. It's the worst. But they have all sorts of food, different, they have, because again, the vertical integration here of, hey, we already have the stuff here, right? And the opportunity to sell the stuff to people, because you're going to buy it prepared and then go, hey, I like this bun. Where do you guys have this bun? I like these, you know what I'm saying? Like, because I bought a brisket sandwich at that place before. I was like, these buns are good. I bought them. I bought a pack of them. So they made money on me buying it prepared, and then they made money on me. It's the same reason they give samples, right?
Right, so exactly.
I think that, as the market continues to change, I think more and more people are going to go, more and more industry is going to go, we should collude rather than compete. Why would we compete with each other? Why would we have a restaurant here and a thing here when we can just collude, right? And we can say, hey, let us have the space in your whatever, right? I know Walmart's relationship with the various restaurants they've had in there has not been great. McDonald's is in some of them, and they're leaving. Same with Subway. And I think it would be interesting to see if a company like Walmart, with its massive reach, they're starting a bank, is something that we've covered here on the show before. Wouldn't it be interesting if Walmart said, yeah, you guys can put a kitchen in our facilities,
I think the partnerships with like Walmart and McDonald's, and I think it's Walmart and Burger King one year or whatever, I think the problem with those partnerships is it was it was doomed from the start. Because it was never a real McDonald's. It was always a limited menu. It was a small area. It was never well kept, right? I never walked into a Walmart that had a McDonald's and thought, "Oh my God, that's a clean McDonald's." Because
I never walked into a Walmart that had a McDonald's because I have too much net worth.
You know what I'm saying, right?
I know.
I think the partnerships were doomed from the get because people weren't happy with the product because the product wasn't what they expected, right?
I'm just saying, I've always lived in ritzy parts of towns where the Walmarts have Subways in them because of, white women on diets. But
hey, one of my first real jobs was at a Kmart that had a Little Caesars in it before they left Texas the first time and then came back. Right. That was back when remember the Bigfoot, the big square pepper. You don't remember the Bigfoot? Like it was a giant rectangular pizza.
Oh, I remember now.
And then they would. Anyway, point is, it was good. That's all I'm saying.
Well, now we know why you're the big man and I'm the medium person. You're the big man and I'm the medium male. In Texas, I am a medium. So.
Is medium?
Yeah. So they listened to the market. They looked at the market just like our last story and said, "Hey, this is going to be a thing. Why wouldn't we participate? Why wouldn't we be the leader in delivery only grocery, delivery only prepared foods? Why wouldn't we have a ghost kitchen? It's a genius." So hey,
and with the partnership, what risk? Yeah. With the partnership, I guarantee the partnership is probably some square footage that they could probably do without anyway, because we talked about, again, on a previous podcast, about how grocery stores are going to look very different in the next decade. They're going to have more, if they keep the same square footage they have now, they're going to have to use it differently. So why not block off? They've got the square footage to lose.
Right.
Is what we're saying. Because the warehouse model in grocery stores is coming.
Dead. Yeah, I mean, no, I think the big box grocery store is dead. I think it's going to go smaller. I think that's the only way they survive.
Well, we talked about it, but they've got these big stores, right? We talked about it, where inside grocery stores in the next decade are going to look more like Costco than they do right now.
Right.
Big boxes on shelves, because 90% of the people that are shopping in aren't shopping in. They're personal shoppers like they are now when you order H-E-B curbside.
So, I'm going to make so I think when it comes to people going into a store, I think most groceries, people who actually walk into a physical, it's going to look like an Aldi. We don't really have Aldi in Central Texas, like a Trader Joe's. But I think, that's the future of people, what I would call actual retailing.
Yeah.
Grocery. And after that, you're right. It's going to be not in H-E-B. There's 2 or 3 in Park that I can think of, right?
Right.
4. Dude. It's going to be 2, and you're going to just pull up to one of them, and some, 14-year-old with pimples is like, "I'm sorry, we didn't get the right crackers."
That's what happens to me now. That's how I shop. I can't tell you the last time I went inside. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, but that's all. Just tip of the hat to people for being smart.
Yeah, no, good on them. Absolutely good on them. I hope it works out for them.
So do I, and I don't know. I mean, maybe we see them acquire some of the smaller chains and just, roll it up as a roll-up strategy, because they'll have this infrastructure that they can start deploying into these chains. It's a chains that they buy that where Kroger's aren't. But I'm trying to think, I've been to Arizona. I know they got Kroger there. Michigan's got Kroger. Every state I've ever been to or visited has a Kroger. So I'm just...
Yeah. No, I think at the very least in the Midwest, right? I mean, they're big. So I think you're going to see a lot of your grocery chains at least watch it, right? Which is what businesses do. They watch each other, and then they copy each other things that work. So
when I lived in Minnesota, the big grocery chain there was Cub, C-U-B. Mm-hmm. So when I moved to Texas, and they said, and they got the same colors, both red. I moved to Austin, and they're like, yeah, go down to because when I was moving into the apartment, when I first signed the lease, I just flew down here and just picked the place, and they're like, yeah, we need a cashier's check. Like, well, you got onto the H-E-B. Like, the what now? Who's a what?
The what now?
And they're like, the grocery store. So I go over there. I'm like, HEBCUB. This is just like what I just came from here. I could see them buying a Cub, right? Because that's obviously just the one I have personal experience with. That is one chain that they could acquire when they're not in that market anymore, right? They could bring a model like this place. Mm-hmm. But I think we should move on to our next story. But first, I want to tell you about the sponsor for the next story. It's Big Man Gear. This guy's idea of merchandising brand. Every corny dad joke on a T-shirt, Amazon Prime. So you just order it on Amazon Prime with all your other stuff. They just ship it to your house. BigManGear.com will take you right to the store. If I was you, I'd go check it out.
Thank you. What's our next story, Danny?
Next story.
We are all Austin heavy today, aren't we?
Totally. My good friend, Mark Cuban, invested in a company on Shark Tank. If you don't know, it's a TV show called Eternova. You ready for this? Mm-hmm. This business is ill. What this company does is...
No, Danny, no.
They take the ashes of your loved ones.
No, Danny. Take that joke back. It's wrong. It's wrong. And the people out there that are listening to this know it's wrong once you tell them what this is.
What Eternova does, and this is a brilliant... I mean, it pisses me off how smart this...
Yeah, so and how simple.
Yeah. If you're unfamiliar with the diamond industry, the last 5 years, really about 8 to 5 years, there's been a revolution called cultured diamonds or lab-grown diamonds. Mm-hmm. Now, these aren't cubic zirconia. So this isn't Diamonique or whatever weird thing from QVC.
Right.
This is an actual diamond.
Right.
So at the birth of the industry, at the birth of this, jewelers were getting fooled. Because somebody would bring in a cultured stone, which they usually bring in about 20 to 30% less than a diamond that comes out of the ground. Which, if you're out there trying to buy a diamond for your girlfriend, first of all, stop being a simp, be a pimp. Secondly, don't buy her a diamond. Buy yourself a Rolex instead. Thirdly, why would you buy her a diamond that came out of the ground when you could go buy a cultured stone? Nobody's going to know the difference.
But cultured, by the way, this is a grown diamond. Yeah. It is not like CZs are manufactured to look like a diamond. Right. This, from a molecular standpoint,
they grow
is
a diamond in a
grown diamond, much like 99% of pearls that you get in today's world, right? We don't go out and clams and pull pearls and do. Well, no, we grow pearls the way that clams grow pearls. Right? In a lab, and they look beautiful, and they can make colors. This is the same thing. They can grow you a diamond and cultivate it, as you said, but literally grow. I think the only thing, and because it is a growth, right? And of course, diamonds are carbon, right? You should in school learn how diamonds are made, pressure from the earth, carbon, right? The pressure creates a diamond, yada, yada. We all learned that in high school, right? Yeah. Which is why we mine and dig for diamonds and stuff like that. The point, though, is in this case, they are using a lab to cultivate a diamond. I think the biggest drawback to this is that it takes 7 months, right? Because, look, and we're all carbon-based life forms. Again, you should have learned that in middle school biology. That's your opinion.
I'm a lizard person.
We're all carbon-based life forms. So as cremation has increased in popularity, right? That's actually the story behind this company. Is the lady that started this had a friend that passed away, didn't have much family, was cremated. It's kind of, from what I got out of the story, she separated her ashes in 3 ways, sent one to distant family and one to her friend, right? And her friend was kind of looking, what am I going to do with these ashes?
Right.
And happened to sit down and have dinner with a guy that was actually growing diamonds. And was like, you realize that ashes are mostly carbon.
Carbon, yeah.
And I can make you a diamond. And she's like, what? You can what?
And they can do it from your hair. They can do it from your pet.
Right.
So if you have a loved one that passes and they're not being cremated, you can take parts of their diamond. Now, the reason this is molto generoso, brilliant business, is because when it comes to diamonds, the markup is ungodly, right?
Unbelievable.
Because it is not just vertically integrated. One company controls the diamond industry.
The beers industry. The beers market, yeah. In
So
some fashion or form.
So the markup on diamonds is ungodly. It's not really a precious stone in the way that a ruby or whatever is. It's all branding. This is an exercise in superb branding. And God bless
100%. Well, and look, gemstones is that way entirely, right? I mean, it much like diamonds, much like artwork and stuff like that, have the same mobster background, right? Okay. Like they use an exchange. There's a reason that diamonds are a currency worldwide and are bought and sold on certain markets and used as value. But it's got the same kind of mobster background as that's what when you talk about value, right? I mean, the markup is so huge, controlled by a company. You talk about monopolies. Right? De Beers has some way or form to control this. And then you add on top of it the, what do you call it, societal around diamonds and diamonds being a best friend and weddings and all of this you add on top of that.
Yeah, and so when you kind of add up the Venn diagram that Eternova lives in, diamonds, high aggressive margin industry.
Yep.
Then loss, personal loss.
Mm-hmm.
Your pet, right? People. I mean, I love pets. I like animals, but I think some people are insane when it comes to their animals.
But they spend a crap ton of money on animals, right?
So, people who lack, people aren't getting married. They're not having kids at the same rate they used to. So your pet, and listen. If I go on Tinder and I see a single woman and she says, her parent or dog mom, dead to me. You're dead to me. You're insane.
But look, there's a lot of people, though. Again, and growing market in the last decade, right?
So they can take your pets, they can take the ashes of your loved ones. The cross-section of these two, and, again, Kevin O'Leary, a co-star on Shark Tank with Mark Cuban, always says people pay an unreasonable multiple for their weddings. They just don't budget for their weddings and funerals. They'll spend any amount of money. So when you take a high margin industry where there isn't a lot of logic, you start explaining. And I've watched my male friends. I watched one of them get married, and his wife was like, "Well, a ring is an investment." No, it's not.
No, it's not.
If you want a ring,
I hate
get you a nice
statement.
Ring.
I hate it. I hate that statement. It's a lie being told by everyone.
Not an investment. It's going to go down in value, and it's barely going to keep pace with inflation.
It wasn't worth the value in the first place. Anyway, don't get me on that soapbox. But weddings in general,
it's an unreasonable amount of money people spend. Take those two things, right, and you find the synergy where you're going to take somebody's, and I 2 years ago lost someone very close to me, my older sister, and unfortunately I didn't and wouldn't have thought to, and would have felt really weird about trying to get a lock of her hair after she passed.
Sure.
But it is absolutely something I would have done to make her daughter's 2 diamond rings out of her, remains.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's like that is.
Well, one of the things they've done here in Central Texas that I think, which is why they just went through another round of funding and raised, $10 million or whatever. This is their, I think, third round of funding actually since Shark Tank or something like that, and they continue to make money. One of the things they've done here in Central Texas, and I know this personally because I saw their brochures and information when my father-in-law passed away not too terribly long ago at the funeral home. So they've partnered with funeral homes, and I'm sure they give them some kind of kickback or whatever.
Of course they do.
But they've partnered with funeral homes. So you just said, well, it would feel really weird getting a lock of hair. Funeral homes do all that stuff for you. There's nothing, right? So if they partner with funeral homes, and here's what they want the money for, right? Right now they provide a service, right? Send us ashes, send us hair, we'll make a diamond out of it. What they want to make it is an experience. That's what they want to make it. They want to get you involved from a standpoint. Look, you're talking about, again, weddings, funerals. People, this process helps people grieve. It helps people. Right. An experience makes people involved and happier. I'll give you an example, and it said this in the article. For example, if you can, for a price, right, come down to the showroom floor of this place, right, with the ashes, you're dropping off the ashes of your loved one, and you can press a button or pull a lever, and that starts the process,
right,
you pay. It's an experience. Right. It's a I was involved. You see what I'm saying? That's what they're planning to do, at least what they say they're planning to do with this money, is they're trying to create an experience through the process, which I think is important because it's 7 to 9 months long.
Right, I guess that's fair. Right, you might not feel like you have a sense of ownership over the thing that's happening. I don't know about you, if this has ever happened to you. I ordered something on Amazon, and 2 days later, when it showed up at my neighbor's house, didn't show up to my house, I didn't notice because I forgot that I ordered it.
Well, no, absolutely. And then you figure 7 to 9 months, okay, you've been grieving, you're grieving. You go on with your life a little bit, and then all of a sudden you get a package in the mail, and it's a diamond made from your dead father. And, I mean, that sounds horrifying to me. I mean, it's nice and it's sad, but how does that not, like, PTSD? Like,
yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like, so I get that they're trying to make it a process so that it's not so alarming, right? But again, that to me is the biggest drawback of this. It's a 7 to 9 month process. So $3,000 though, in the grand scheme of rings, is not a lot of money.
Not a crazy amount of money
for what it's doing, right? So I think it's a good price point. Again, the 7 to 9 months. That's if anything kills it, that's what'll kill it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the only thing that, for me, it's like, I don't want to be reminded of again, but at the same time, you bothered to do this, bothered to engage with this process, spend this volume of money on something, it makes me feel like maybe this is going to be a lengthier grieving process for you. You know?
I also felt at the time, again, my experience, not anybody else's, and they've done over 1,500 of these, right? From 1,000 different customers, 40% of their business is pets or whatever. At the time, my wife and I talked about this. She saw the flyer, and your very first thought, or her very first thought, was, that sounds really cool, right, or whatever. But then the more we talked about it, the more kind of creeped out she got. Does that make sense?
And I wonder how many people in the throes of their grief buy the ring and then go, I don't exactly want to walk around with my passed away father's hair, you know?
Right, well, and that's what I'm saying. Like, so, and that kind of came around, and which is why we didn't do anything, right? Ultimately, we didn't do anything with it. So, at least that was my experience with it, right? So and that's all I can say, say for it. But I would think at least some people would go through that. Is all I'm saying.
No, and I like the concept.
They made a comment in this article that said people don't want traditional funerals anymore. I think obviously to get into the masses, whereas what you want to be, right? This is not a reoccurring thing. It's a one-shot deal. You're going to have to make it, if you want to get to your numbers, your masses, right, you're going to have to not make comments like that, right? You're going to have to make it part of a process where they're being cremated or whether they're being buried, whether they're whatever it may be. You're just going to have to say, look, this is an addition to instead of.
Well, I guess it's not true. I mean, because my instructions in my living will is upon my death, I'm cremated. My ashes are supposed to be split up into 3. Two of the locations are undisclosed where my ashes will be spread, and the other one is Galveston.
Very nice. Very nice.
But before we get into this next story, I want to tell you about a new sponsor to our show, Powerhouse Drones. If you're interested in getting into drones, powerhousedrones.com. Teach you all about what drones to buy and where to get started with drones.
Very nice. I like it.
Powerhousedrones.com.
New sponsors? I like new sponsors. Yeah. All right. What's our last story of the day?
It's my company, so.
Hey, I like it.
Yep.
Drones
this
are
next
cool.
one. This next one is a story that is really near and dear to my heart.
It's a non-story story, Danny.
It's not a non-story story.
Danny has to have a non-story story. Go ahead, explain to them what the story is so I can tell you why it's a non-story.
Okay. If you're a subscriber to Zoom, which we are on this we use the Zoom is the categorically stupidest piece of software. I have to put in so many passwords. True. I have to put in 50 passwords. I have to do all this stuff. And on this podcast alone, which you'll notice is a bunch of hard cuts because the software randomly kept conking out every 4 to 7 minutes.
Probably due to user error on Danny's side, but go ahead.
No, I'm a technology whiz. I'm a guru. I am the senior advisor of technology to university. I started
just gives
university.
Himself titles, folks.
That's correct.
And I just let it slide because it's easier than dealing with them. Go ahead.
So people have broken into Zoom calls and all that other stuff. Zoom had to pay an $85 million settlement over Zoom. Can't say the one word.
Okay. You can't. I wasn't sure. So
I can say it, but I don't want to find out.
Everybody out there, look, everybody out there watching this podcast knew that there was, a couple of months last year that people logging into Zoom, company Zooms and
goofing around,
showing bad videos or making fun of people or saying stupid things. It was a thing for a quick minute, right? Like a month and a half or whatever, right?
Right.
Some of those companies got together and turned around and sued Zoom and said two things. One, we don't think you're living up to your privacy, things. Promise. And this is happening, right? What's going on with the security? Now, when I say it's a non-story story, one, this lawsuit was never going to succeed.
Right.
Okay, Zoom is protected just like Facebook's protected, just like all these other social media type of platforms is out there protected under that Article 230 that everybody's up in arms about. So it was never going to go through. Two, in this settlement, Zoom, like a lot of lawsuits when they end and people just write somebody a check, is not culpable for any. They're basically saying, look, we don't want to deal with this anymore. Yeah, they're not admitting to anything.
So the non-story aspect of this story is the fact that they haven't admitted to anything. They're not held liable for anything, and the other party in the matter who brought the suit to begin with agrees that they're not. Like, that's part of the agreement of taking the settlement. Right. They got $85 million.
But let's do the math though, right? Yeah. So these companies that filed the lawsuit during last year wrote checks in totality to Zoom for $1.3 billion.
Right. So, the 85.
They gave them an $85 million refund.
Yeah. But doesn't mean nothing.
So is it a story?
No.
Is Zoom culpable in anything? Did they really, did they do anything wrong? Because from what I remember of the stories, now I probably should have gone back and pulled up those stories, but I really didn't because I was kind of flighting on this one. The point, though, is if I remember from those stories back then, the stories were, these were companies not using Zoom's privacy settings properly and setting up things like simple passwords for meetings. So a hacker that got into your Zoom list just was able to just enter and leave any meeting they felt like.
So the reason I included the story is because I hate Zoom.
I know you do, and I get that, which is why you know.
Yeah, so we record this podcast over Zoom, and I believe Zoom belongs. I'm not Catholic, and I never was really Catholic, so like the third or fourth ring of hell. I don't know how the rings of hell work. I'm Protestant. And so we just have one. It's a unilevel. It's a rambler. Hell for us is a rambler. But so I don't know, but this is where Zoom belongs. I hate Zoom. I hate that I have to, like the big man is all constantly complaining that I'm late. I'm on time. I am on time. I'm set up. I'm ready to go. I'm only late because I have to spend half an hour putting in passwords, room codes. Okay,
that is user error. That is.
I have purchased cars.
I'm ready to go at the time of recording. I am. So if I have to do the same thing you do and more, because Danny says he's all these things, but I'm actually in charge of recording with it, editing it. But anyway, so I do all of that, but somehow I'm still on time.
Right. Well, you really got nothing going on over at your place, so you're not really busy.
Sure.
I'm busy. I'm a business owner with thriving opportunities that I'm constantly taking advantage of. But what is interesting about this is that it proves that, like, I mean, Zoom was the kind of golden child of the last 18 months of the Panini, right? Zoom came out with perhaps one of the biggest wins because, like, in the same way that my mom will say, well, she FaceTimed with my nephew, I'll go, my sister doesn't have an Apple phone.
Right.
So you can't FaceTime. So I'm like, yeah, we'll just do a Zoom meeting. And they don't, it's the Kleenex. They don't mean Zoom.
No, absolutely.
We're using because...
But it is what it is. That's why we use it for this podcast. It's simple to use. It's not simple to use. It is simple to use.
No. I did an interview on a podcast. You can go find it. It's JV Adulting. We logged in on StreamYard. It took 2 seconds. I didn't have to throw in, like, I got to give this thing my social security number, a thumbprint, a blood sample. It needs a lock of my hair.
StreamYard is a completely different type of platform, but all right.
So I use Jitsi for any meeting that I have with anybody. I use Jitsi.
Which is awful. Great. Awful. 100% awful. See, this is where Danny and I get into it on when we talk about Market Explainer and how Danny and I are different. Is Danny just name anything that is mainstream? Oh, that's horrible. That's awful. That is not like he does it just. It's like dealing.
Okay, wait, hold on. Give them an example that isn't Jitsi and Zoom. There you go.
Okay, I'm sorry. Being put on the spot. I
should have had something
ready. I knew you were going to pull it out like that.
You go.
Again, I've referenced, it's like being married before. It's like when your wife says, give me one example of blah, 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 blah. And you're like, I don't freaking care that much. Why would I do it? This is what Danny does to me on the podcast, right?
That's not what I do.
It's fine. The point is,
I enlighten and I entertain.
If you say you like it, Danny will say it's horrible. If you say it's easy, Danny will say it's hard. It doesn't matter. It's a can't win battle. But all right.
And in between all of this, by the way, this whole long rant about how I hate everything, we had to stop using Zoom. We had to disconnect, and I had to reboot it twice.
Again, just like freezing. My wife, after 20-something years, picks very good times to complain about things. Like, it's like she's waiting for that one moment where her point is the most valid. That's what you're doing right now. So, good on you, Danny, for picking a great opportunity to pick a story when we happen to be having a problem.
I did not pick a great time to have a story. I curate these stories days in advance. Okay? Today just happened to be a day where the road rose to meet us.
Well, you should go play the lottery today.
I play every week
because it is your lucky day, my friend.
Well, I think that in spite and because of all of our various technology issues, we are going to call it a show a little earlier than usual. We do have a lot more things to say, but for that reason, we are going to cut it loose. And I just want to leave everybody with this word of wisdom here from me to you. Because if you read the subtitles of one season of any Netflix show, it is the exact same thing as reading a book.
No.
It is.
No, it's not, Danny.
Yeah. I read 4 to 5 books a month.
We'll see you next time, folks. If we're still here.